Good morning, sixth graders. I hope you are all doing well today. Today's Wednesday. Today you are going to need your Springboard book, your social studies book, your ELA and social studies notebooks, your Boy the Painted Cave book, and a pencil. So this next slide, we are doing this in class. So we're during our Zoom, so we're not going to worry about that right now. Our book talk today is called Ghost by Jason Reynolds. This is an awesome book about a kid who has just he's had a hard life. He's had some real anger issues and some tendencies that are not the best. And then he gets on this track team, and this track team is made up of all different kids. So this is an interesting book because it's not a series, but it's a 4-part book set. You don't have to read them in order about these 4 different kids on this track team. So this is probably my favorite. There's one other one that I really like. It's the first one that came out. And so it's suspenseful. It's really good. It's raw. It's real. It's realistic fiction. So anyway, it's just a really good book. And I think that you guys would really enjoy it. And the fact that it has companion books is also huge because then you can read those too, if you like it. Okay, so that is Ghost by Jason Reynolds. Today is Wednesday, so we are going to listen to The Jacket. As we read, I want you to look for similes and metaphors. So we did a little bit of review of similes and metaphors yesterday. Similes are when you compare two things using the words like and as, and metaphors are, and then I have this here. A metaphor also compares two things, but it's saying one thing is another. So the book was a passport to adventure. So we could totally turn that into a simile and say the book was like a passport to adventure. So they're very, very similar. However, similes have like or as. So that is the secret ingredient to figuring out the difference. All right, so that's a review of similes and metaphors. Like I said, we are going to be talking about The Jacket today. So go ahead and get out your Springboard books and turn to page 28. Okay, and if you need to push pause on me, do that. Get your book. You could use a highlighter for this. You can use a pencil and just make a star or underline it. But what you're doing right now is you are looking for similes and metaphors as we read. Okay, so you should have your book open to page 28, and then you should have a pen or a pencil and be ready to go. All right. Okay, so as you listen, underline any similes or metaphors you hear. You can also highlight or put a star if you want. And then after listening, what we're going to do, we're going to not do that list today. I got confused about something. We're going to do that list tomorrow. So we're going to share that during our Zoom tomorrow, and you guys are going to, we're going to share similes and metaphors in The Jacket. So look for those as we read, and then we will share out tomorrow. Okay, so The Jacket by Gary Soto. My clothes have failed me. I remember the green coat that I wore in 5th and 6th grades when you either danced like a champ or pressed yourself against a greasy wall, bitter as a penny toward the happy couples. When I needed a new jacket and my mother asked what kind I wanted, I described something like bikers wear. Black leather and silver studs with enough belts to hold down a small town. We were in the kitchen, steam from the window from her cooking. She listened so long while stirring dinner that I thought she understood for sure what kind I wanted. The next day, when I got home from school, I discovered draped on my bedpost a jacket the color of day-old guacamole. I threw my books on the bed and approached the jacket slowly, as if it were a stranger whose hand I had to shake. I touched the vinyl sleeve, the collar, and peeked at the mustard-colored lining. From the kitchen, Mother yelled that my jacket was in the closet. I closed the door to her voice and pulled out the rack of clothes from the closet, hoping the jacket on the bedpost wasn't for me, but my mean brother. No luck. I gave up. From my bed, I stared at the jacket. I wanted to cry because it was so ugly and so big that I knew I'd have to wear it a long time. I was a small kid, thin as a young tree, and it would be years before I'd have a new one. I stared at the jacket like an enemy, thinking bad things before I took off my old jacket, whose sleeves climbed halfway to my elbow. I put the big jacket on. I zipped it up and down several times and rolled the cuffs up so they didn't cover my hands. I put my hands in the pocket and flapped the jacket like birds' wings. I stood in front of the mirror, full face, then profile, then looked over my shoulder as if someone had called me. I sat on the bed, stood against the bed, and combed my hair to see what I would look like doing something natural. I looked ugly. I threw it on my brother's bed and looked at it for a long time before I slipped it on and went out to the backyard, smiling a thank you to my mom as I passed her in the kitchen. With my hands in my pockets, I kicked a ball against the fence and then climbed it to sit looking in the alley. I hurled orange peels at the mouth of an open garbage can, and when the peels were gone, I watched the white puffs of my breath thin to nothing. I jumped down, hands in my pockets, and in the backyard, on my knees, I teased my dog Brownie by swooping my arms while making bird calls. He jumped at me and missed. He jumped again and again until a tooth sunk deep, ripping an L-shaped tear on my sleeve. I pushed Brownie away to study the tear, sorry I said tear before, as I would a cut on my arm. There was no blood, only a few pieces of fuzz. Damn dog, I thought, and pushed him away hard when he tried to bite again. I got up from my knees and went to my bedroom to sit with my jacket on my lap with the lights out. That was the first afternoon with my new jacket. The next day, I wore it to 6th grade and got a D on a math quiz. During the morning recess, Frankie T, the playground terrorist, pushed me to the ground and told me to stay there until recess was over. My best friend, Steve Negrete, ate an apple while looking at me, and the girls turned away to whisper on the monkey bars. The teachers were no help. They looked my way and talked about how foolish I looked in my new jacket. I saw their heads bob with laughter and their hands half covering their mouths. Okay, I'm going to pause right there because I want to remind you that, excuse me, remember when we are reading a story from a particular person's perspective, it means that it's from that person's perspective, but not necessarily true. Like, I highly doubt the teachers were there laughing at him. They are probably talking about something completely unrelated, but he's just feeling like it's all about him right now because he hates his jacket so much. Okay, so we're on paragraph 7 now. Even though it was cold, I took off the jacket during lunch and played kickball in a thin shirt, my arms feeling like Braille from Goosebumps. But when I returned to class, I slipped the jacket on and shivered until I was warm. I sat on my hands, heating them up, while my teeth chattered like a cup of cooked rice. Like a cup of crooked dice. That's funny. Finally warm, I slid out of the jacket, but put it back on a few minutes later when the fire bell rang. We paraded out to the yard where we, the 6th graders, walked past all the other grades to stand against the back fence. Everybody saw me. Although they didn't say loud, "Man, that's ugly," I heard the buzz of gossip and even laughter that I knew was meant for me. And so I went in my guacamole-colored jacket. So embarrassed, so hurt, I couldn't even do my homework. I received C's on quizzes and forgot the state capitals and the rivers of South America, our friendly neighbor. Even the girls who had been friendly blew away like loose flowers to follow the boys in the neat jackets. I wore that thing for 3 years until the sleeves grew short and my forearms stuck out like necks of turtles. All during that time, no love came to me, No little dark girl in a Sunday dress she wore on Monday. At lunchtime, I stayed with the ugly boys who leaned against the chain link fence and looked around with propellers of grass spinning in their mouths. We saw girls walk alone, saw couples hand in hand, their heads like bookends pressing air together. We saw them and spun our propellers so fast our faces were blurs. I blame that jacket for those bad years. I blame my mother for her bad taste and her cheap ways. It was a sad time for the heart. With a friend, I spent my 6th grade year in a tree in an alley waiting for something good to happen to me in that jacket, which had become the ugly brown who tagged along the ugly brother who tagged along wherever I went. And it was about the time that I began to grow. My chest puffed up with muscle, and strangely, a few more ribs. Even my hands, those fleshy hammers, showed bravely through the cuffs, the fingers already hardening for the coming fights. But that L-shaped rip on the left sleeve got bigger. Bits of stuffing coughed out from its wound after a hard day of play. I finally scotch-taped it closed. But in rain or cold weather, the tape peeled off like a scab, and more stuffing fell out till that sleeve shriveled up into a palsied arm. The winter that the elbows began to crack, and the whole chunks of green began to fall off. I showed the cracks to my mother, who always seemed to be at the stove with steamed-up glasses, and she said there were children in Mexico who would love that jacket. I told her that this was America and yelled that Debbie, my sister, didn't have a jacket like mine. I ran outside, ready to cry, and climbed the tree by the alley to think bad thoughts and watch my breath puff white and disappear. But whole pieces still casually flew off my jacket when I played hard, read quietly, or took vicious spelling tests at school. When it became so spotted that my brother began to call me camouflage, I flung it over the fence into the alley. Later, however, I swiped the jacket off the ground and went inside to drape it across my lap and mope. I was called to dinner. Steam silvered my mother's glasses as she said grace. My brother and sister, with their heads bowed, made ugly faces at their glasses of powdered milk. I gagged too, but eagerly ate big rips of buttered tortilla that held scooped up beans. Finally, I went outside with my jacket across my arm. It was a cold sky. The face of the clouds were piled up, hurting. I climbed the fence, jumped down with a grunt. I started up the alley and soon slipped into my jacket, that green, ugly brother who breathed over my shoulder that day and ever since. Okay, so that was our first reading of The Jacket. Hopefully you guys, even though I was reading and I wasn't really concentrating on similes and metaphors, I saw several. So hopefully you saw some too. Okay, and that you underlined them or highlighted them. Now, you guys are going to go ahead and answer questions 1 and 2 in your springboard books. If you want to go through the story again on your own time and look for more similes and metaphors, that's a great idea. Tomorrow in Zoom, we're going to discuss questions 1 and 2, and then we're also going to share similes and metaphors. So just make sure you're ready for that and that you've done your work so that you can be a part of the discussion. Okay, so that's that, and that is that for language arts today. Moving on to social studies, we're right here. We are going to continue our talks about the Neolithic Age and the Agricultural Revolution. And you should be taking notes as we go through the slides. I also highly suggest reading these pages. We're not going to do it as a class, but it is something that you need to do. Read pages 24 to 27 in your notebook or in your textbook. That's not a lot of pages. And go ahead and in your textbooks, you guys can highlight, you can annotate, anything, because they're consumables, so you get to keep them. So make sure that you're using them because that's something that you're going to need to do in high school and college and all of that. Okay, So let's go over our slides for today. So again, Life in the Neolithic Age at page 24 through 27 in your books. So some important words for this chapter are shrines, and shrines are holy places. And early societies are beginning to develop religious places of worship. So a shrine could be like a church, and usually in a church, it's at like the altar or something like that. So a shrine is a holy place. And then we have I'm going to say this wrong. The cattle hui, oh wait, there it is. Kaltal-huyuk. Chawtal-huyuk. Okay, that is the oldest discovered Neolithic village. So that's kind of cool. And we can see that here. Early Neolithic villages, which we can see here, people start to have more organized communities and societies, little towns, things like that. Because remember before, like in Boy of the Painted Cave, they just kind of hang out at camp and things like that. Okay, so with the agricultural revolution came something that we still really use today, and that's specialization. And they talked a little bit about this in one of the videos that we watched yesterday. So specialization is when people take up other economic activities other than farming. People took specific jobs as their talents allowed, skilled workers, artisans, craftsmen, etc. And then that is important to know because that's how we live today. I chose for my job to be a teacher because I really like kids. I love education. I love to read. I love to study, all of these things. So it was a great job for me, and that is what I chose to specialize in. Okay? And you guys will go in your lives and you'll choose something to specialize in. Okay, and then we're going to move on. So the Neolithic period, the late Stone Age, started in around 8000 BCE. Then we move into the Bronze Age, which was the time period between 3000 and 1200 BCE. And bronze, if you don't know, it's the mix of copper and tin. It's a metal. So at this time, the early humans started making metal tools and accessories and things like that. So that was a huge development too. All right, so that's it for social studies today. And that's why, since it was so short, you definitely need to read in your book. So if you want to push pause now and then do Boy of the Painted Cave after school and read your social studies book, that would be a good idea. Okay, because Boy of the Painted Cave is meant to be read after school. So we're going to go ahead and start reading that. Here is the PDF if you follow along with this, if you do not have a book. If you do have a book, we are on chapter 12, which starts on page 108, where we last left off. Tao brought some food for his community. He's starting to hope Volt will be a little more friendly, maybe even accept Ram, things like that. So page 108, chapter 12. With Graybeard gone, Tao felt a new sense of emptiness. He spent much of his time drawing mammoths, bison, and rhinos in Graybeard's little cavern. Each evening, he stood on top of the cliff, scanning the valley, waiting for the old man to return. As the days passed and Graybeard did not show up, the boy became impatient. Why does he not come back? He thought. He has always kept his word. Maybe something is wrong. He considered going to find him, but he knew he could not cross the river or go into the lands of the other people. Each day, the boy waited with growing concern. Then one day in the slough, Ram growled, and Tao looked up to see Graybeard standing in the middle of the glade as if he had come out of the earth. He had his flint-tipped spear in his hand, and he carried the shoulder blade of a horse strapped to his back. Tao hurried toward him, an expression of joy and relief in his eyes. I am happy to see you, old shaman. It has been a long time. Graybeard nodded. There were many places I must go, and I do not walk as fast as I used to. The old man coughed and passed a shaky hand across his brow. Tao winced as he saw the worn face, the pinched cheekbones. He was worried, but he knew the old man would not want him to show concern. "The cave is ready," Tao said, "but first you must rest and eat." He took some dried meat and fish from his leather pouch, and they sat with their backs against an old red oak and ate their meal. Tao wondered if Graybeard remembered his promise. When they were finished, they started across the valley. Graybeard stopped many times, poking around the stream beds and gravel banks with the shaft of his spear, searching. Then he found what he was looking for. He picked up a stick and dug out a handful of bright red earth. "Here," he said as he poured it into an empty leather sack. "This will make good paint. Now we must find yellows and whites." "I have yellow clay," said Tao. The old man did remember. "Good. We can dig up some limestone powder near the foot of the cliffs. That will mix well for the lighter colors." When they had all of the red, white, and yellow earth they needed, they went up to the top of the cliff using the easy path that Graybeard had found. They reached the tunnel to the hidden cave and removed the cover of branches to let in the sunlight. In the cave, Graybeard sat on the ground and Tao squatted beside him. The old man poured some of the red earth into one of the saucer-shaped rocks that Tao had collected. Then, using a smooth, round stone, he began grinding it into a fine powder. When it was to his liking, he added some of Tao's fish oil, mixing it into a dark red paint. He poured a small amount of this into 3 other shallow stone dishes. In the first one, he added a lump of yellow clay. In the second, he sprinkled limestone powder, and in the third, he added charcoal dust. Using a small clean stick for each, he mixed them well, ending with 3 different colors: a bright orange, a salmon pink, and a dark brown. Tao was amazed. He sat quietly, watching. This too was magic, he thought. Graybeard spread out more saucers and began blending shades of yellow, browns, grays, and blacks. Some he mixed with honey, and some with the boiled fat and clotted blood from the boar. "Next, we must make our brushes," he said. He took a handful of twigs from his pouch and began smashing the ends with a stone until they were soft and ragged. He held one up in the shaft of sunlight, beaming through the cave entrance. He turned it around for Tao to see. "These are small," he said, "for painting eyes and fine lines of hair and fur." He made larger brushes by tying feathers and boar bristles around the ends of long sticks with strings of vegetable fiber. When all the paints and brushes were made, the old man got to his feet. "Now," he said, "we are ready to paint." Tao held out the shoulder blade of the horse, while Graybeard poured spots of the colored paints into its broad white surface. He handed the boy one of the large brushes and pointed to Tao's pictures of rhinos, bison, and mammoths. The boy held his breath. He had never had a brush in his hand before. "Which one will I paint?" Graybeard smiled. "You are the image maker. Paint the one you like the best." "The mountains that walk," said Tao. Graybeard nodded. "Then begin." Tao hesitated, glancing at the paints on the shoulder blade, uncertain. "You saw the mammoth," said Graybeard. "What color were they?" "Reddish brown," said the old man. Reddish brown? "Good," said the old man. "Then mix a little black with the red until you have the color you wish." Tao dipped his brush into a spot of black, then mixed it with the red. He lifted his hand and touched it to the drawing. It was still too light, so he dipped in another dab of black. Again, his brush touched the drawing. He smiled. It was a deep reddish brown, the color he wanted. He continued to dip and touch. Graybeard watched as Tao repeated the motion again and again. He reached out and stopped the boy's hand. "You are not painting on an antler or a seashell," he said. "You are painting on a wall. Do not dab. Swing the brush with your whole arm." Graybeard took the brush and began sweeping across the drawing, following the lines of the mammoth's body. Tao saw the old man's face brighten as he worked, laying on great swaths of color. He felt the excitement as the picture came alive. "Do not be afraid," said Graybeard, his eyes glowing. "You can always go over what you do not like." He gave the brush back to Tao, and the boy tried again. This time he let his arm go free, swinging the brush across the wall. He mixed gray with yellow to fill the light areas around the chest and stomach. He painted dark shadows on the shoulders and back to add shading. He saw his mammoth begin to breathe as he filled the eyes and the waving trunk. When the painting was finished, Graybeard cracked open the duck eggs. He separated the yolks and set them apart. He poured the whites into a clean cockle shell, stirred them with a stick, and handed the shell to Tao. The boy was puzzled. "What is this for?" "Spread it over your painting and you will see." With a feather brush, Tao washed the egg white over the picture. This time the mammoth came alive with bright new colors. He stared at it in surprise. This had been done by his own hand. He smiled. Never had he felt so happy. The following morning, Graybeard went off on his mission of mercy and magic. He was gone for long periods, but he always returned to the little cavern at the top of the cliff to show the boy more about the painting. How to make light and shadows, where to find the red and yellow earth with which to make colors. Sometimes they sat together on the edge of the cliffs, talking. Here they looked up at the night sky, and Graybeard pointed out the stars, the first one to appear each night, the one that was red, and the one that always leads toward the north. Here, too, Graybeard showed him how to make fire and told him where to find the special herbs to cure sickness. The last time the old man went off on his journey, Tao and Ram walked with him across the valley. When they reached the river, Graybeard turned. "Your drawings are better now. They are true and they begin to live. Maybe now you can call yourself a cave painter." "I thank you for that," said Tao, "and for all of the things you have taught me. I am happy." The old man smiled. "You know the many beautiful things you can make with a brush and a dab of paint. That is all you have to know. That is all that really matters." They said goodbye, and as the old man walked away, Tao heard the long, hacking cough. He noticed the weary, shambling gait. His heart ached, and deep inside, he was afraid for his old friend. All right, so that is where we are going to stop today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Make sure to go into Otis and answer the chapter 12 questions. Please remember to answer them in complete sentences. Also remember that if it asks for evidence from the text, provide that. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.